Brothers, sisters, friends, and enemies. There's so much going on in current events that I think it's necessary to help you get a perspective on the spiritual and the prophetic side of what you're seeing and hearing. Just a few days ago, Benjamin Netanyahu was elected, and he did a phenomenal job because he was elected during the opposition by the American president and the states of affairs. So there was, considerable opposition. And Obama even sent some people over there to, stir it up against him. So what we have to examine is see what's going on. Tomorrow will be the solar eclipse, which is supposed to be, or usually is associated with, God making a judgment on the nations. So what we have to anticipate in these next weeks or so is a great understanding that somehow Netanyahu came forward and at the last moment before the election polls were opened, he made a stirring speech where he declared there would be, during his term in office, there would be no Palestinian state and that no land would be given up. Now, we have to understand that that is in total agreement with the Word of God, that God will bless those who make political and psychological as well as military moves to maintain the borderlands of Israel, the land that God gave to the Jewish people. And he has done that. But then there are many nations like the United States and our president and all, and the United Nations, we had Bush Sr. was the first to say it, then Bush Jr., and then Bill Clinton chimed in, and now President Obama. And they're calling for a two-state solution, which would mean giving up Gaza or a larger portion, as well as many people have called out for them giving up Jerusalem or so forth and so on. So in all the confusion, here's what the Bible says, that in the last days, Israel will become a cup of trembling to the nations. In other words, things would be happening in the Middle East concerning Israel that will cause the rest of the world, nations, to be very concerned about what could happen and what could be happening. Well, guess what, folks? This is one of the biggest signs of the last days. Because right now, with the conflict between Iran becoming a nuclear nation, Iraq all divided and in a Sunni-Sufi war, with the military rising and falling of Persia, and remember, Iran really is a leftover Persian nation. But we have a problem in that the other Muslim nations, they're happy for a change that Israel is opposing Iran. We tend to think of all people in the Middle East of being the same ethnic and national group, but that is not the case. There are a lot of divisions between Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, and they're all Egyptians, and all of them, they fear Iran. The leftovers of the power and the mindset of the Persian nations, and especially of one of them having nuclear weapons, is a really scary situation, because there hasn't been a shortage of Arab nations fighting Arab nations. That is part of what they do. So within that framework, Jordan and a number of other countries have thrown some, at least verbal support to Israel to force Iran not to have a nuclear program that could result in them having nuclear weapons. Now, the last leader of Iran made it very clear. They are looking for the return of the 12th Imam, which in this case, of course, is the Imam that is going to bring about the establishment of Islam as a world religion. And from that, Allah will step onto the scene with Muhammad and the Jewish Arabic Jesus, who then would take over the world. But the outcome of that situation is that the Jews and the Gentiles that are not Muslims would be finally beaten and destroyed. Now, we have a major conflict in understanding this because we have a lot of people that are Americans that are thrown into the mix, and here's the problem. The problem is cultural. Yes, we are in the United States of America. We believe in freedom for everyone. We believe in cooperation with everyone. We believe in the teachings of the Judeo-Christian way, which is love your neighbor as yourself. And we believe that as you give something to someone, that it will return to you. We believe many of those things. And we have a sense of fighting for freedom, willing to die for freedom, so that everyone can, quote, do their thing. But the problem becomes that most people are not familiar with what Islam's thing is. We just don't have a clue. So I hope you would research this. I'm going to give you some information that has not been as available but should be. For example, recently the mayor of New York City, he just passed an ordinance, I guess it would be called, of giving Muslim holidays, 2 Muslim holidays. This would be celebrated in New York City. In all the 5 boroughs, these Muslim holidays would be accepted, schools would be closed, and people would be aware of these holidays and celebrate them. The population of Muslims in New York City and the 5 boroughs is approximating, it's not there yet, but it's over 1%, and it's approximating 2%. Now, that same number is held by the Chinese and Japanese people of heritage, but they don't have any holidays. The Afro-American population is larger, and we have some holidays that are not really, quote, black. The school system doesn't shut down for Kwanzaa. It does recognize Martin Luther King, but it doesn't recognize him as an Afro-American. It recognizes him as a world peace leader. It recognizes him as someone that stood for racial harmony and that political move. So we have a little problem here. If we don't examine those holidays, one is Ramadan, which is a time of fasting and prayer. But the other holiday is very interesting. It technically is the celebration of Abraham going to the mountain and sacrificing, you ready? Ishmael. Now, most of the Jews in New York City and the Gentiles, they have historically celebrated that Abraham, not with a holiday, but have celebrated in their religious experience, that Abraham went to the mountain and sacrificed Isaac. Very interesting. And Isaac was the father of the 12 tribes, and we go on and on and on through the scriptures with that. But Muhammad comes along and changes the story and puts it in the Quran, that Abraham, he lays claim to Abraham and declares that Abraham's first son, who was born from she was a concubine named Hagar, and she was of Egyptian descent. So she was not an Arab, she was of Egyptian descent. Hagar has the son Ishmael, and then 13 years later, Abraham's wife, who in this case was Sarah, she gives birth to Isaac. Now, the conflict is very interesting because Muhammad laid claim to Ishmael and planted the seed in the minds of people everywhere that Ishmael is the connection to the Arabs, which is then the connection to Abraham, who is the accepted father of faith of Christianity and Judaism. Now, I've done my research on this, and in my book, Handle the Truth, I go into great detail to trace that connection. And what we learned from Adolf Hitler is if you tell a lie long enough, you can get somebody to believe it. So I went to the Arab scholars, and the Arab scholars is easy for you to find. The Arab scholars are clear on this issue, and they say there is no connection because historically Ishmael and his 12 sons stayed in Canaan land, lived there. They died there in the area of Hebron, and there was no reason for them to leave, and they celebrated their lives as Jews, which means that there is no way that they would have gone into the Arabian areas and throw stones at the black stone that is worshipped, because ancient Jew would have seen it as an idol. But the Muslims march around it, and Muhammad went as far as to claim that Abraham and Ishmael spent time in Arabia. That cannot historically be documented or completed. The other problem is that if the Arabs are descendants, which couldn't happen because the Arab nations were there existing at the time the Jews were there in Canaan land existing. But if there was a connection, the Bible declares that the Ishmaelites were in the southern, western part of the land that we call Israel or Palestine, and they were under a curse. And as a result of the curse that they were under, was because they had incorporated other pagan rituals and practices, but they get absorbed. Nobody is an Ishmaelite today. You can't find the root of them because they were absorbed into Judaism, or they passed away as a tribe and as peoples. And that is very clear to us even in the book of Genesis, that the Ishmaelites did not follow God clearly. And as a matter of fact, it is the Ishmaelites that bought Joseph, who's one of the main figures in Judaism and Christianity. They bought Joseph and threw him into slavery under the Pharaohs. So they were nowhere near Arabia, so there's no history for that. And I repeat, Arab scholars point out that Muhammad, when he created this interconnection, he was trying to establish his faith and trying to get people to give validity to Islam equal to or superior to Judaism and Christianity. But the historical record, there is none, and that's very clear even in the Arab culture when we historically look at it. So now we're in a period of time where they will be celebrating a holiday that is in complete opposition to the rest of the religions in the New York area. We live in very strange times. But Israel has become a cup of trembling, so that our president and the political figures are trying to bring pressure on Israel. They're trying to also coordinate a peace agreement with Iran. And now today I just heard on the news that the peace agreement that they're working on doesn't put the type of limitations on their nuclear program that Israel is hoping for. So that cup of trembling is getting hotter. And now that Netanyahu has been given support by his nation to be powerful and strong, I wouldn't be surprised if in the very near future, Israel made some serious moves to guarantee that Persia will not become a competitive world nation that could unloose a nuclear holocaust on Israel. Very interesting, very, very interesting. Now, the solar eclipse is going to be tomorrow, and here's what we have to be careful about. A solar eclipse points to judgment on the nations. Could it be that the nations that have opposed Netanyahu and have opposed Israel protecting itself, could it be that with this solar eclipse, in that time period following it immediately, God will bring economic judgment on those nations? We have to be careful as we observe what God does. We have to be careful interpreting it. And so I ask you, I beg you, be patient before you draw a conclusion on the outcome. But let's not jump to conclusions. Let's watch carefully. Now then, later in the summer and the fall, there will be another 2 more lunar eclipses, which will bring us to a judgment of Israel. And Israel is going to be judged by God because they failed to maintain the holidays and so forth, and those Sabbath things. So as you watch the news, keep your eye out. We're living in an exciting time, but that cup of trembling is boiling. Boiling. May God richly bless you. Keep your eye on the signs of the time.